Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're going to be talking about a rather interesting topic, both firearm and ammunition. We're going to be talking about the 6.8 SPC cartridge and the LWRCI 6.8 rifle. Now when you think about the 6.8 SPC, there's two companies that come to mind. First is for the ammunition is Silver State Armory. Second is going to be LWRCI for rifles. For as far as the ammunition is concerned, we'll talk about a little bit of the origin of that ammunition first. This goes back to the early global war on terrorism. Now, the concept of a 6mm cartridge being the best overall combat round is not new. It's been utilized in military rifles for many years. A 6.5 Carcano, for instance. Even in the U.S. military, at one point, we looked at it as well. The 6mm SAW, it was called. We're going to take a look at those pictures even closer. But the cartridge itself came out of the global war on terrorism. There was a gentleman named Steve Holland, 5th Special Forces Group, who had basically felt that the 5.56 was underpowered, and it was needed to have a much more potent cartridge, one that had more range, more penetration, more stopping power. And he certainly had felt that the 6mm was the way to go. He had done a lot of the development work on his own, and eventually he would get assistance from the U.S. Army Marksmanship Unit, and from there it would go to Remington. Remington would do a significant amount of R&D work on it. We're going to take a look at some of these cartridges and sort of take you through the process. Looking at the ammunition, the first time the U.S. military really looked at it was in the 80s with the 6mm SAW program. This is actually a steel cartridge case with a 6mm projectile. It was tested as a possible replacement for the 5.56mm as well as the 7.62mm. The testing actually went rather well for it, but the biggest problems were, first of all, NATO standardization, and second of all was the cost of rebarreling multiple rifles and machine guns for it. So the concept was a success, but it was never really adopted. When Steve Holland went to work on his 6.8 SPC cartridge, the baseline was the 30 Remington cartridge. That was basically the host cartridge. What he did was he scaled it down so it would actually fit in a magazine for an M16 or an M4 carbine. So he shortened it down, and the projectile weight that it started off with was about 115 grains. And that 115 grain projectile had a velocity of around 75 foot a second. You can go with a 120 grain bullet as well, which would go about 2,460 foot a second. And he also had a 110 grain projectile that went 2,500 feet per second. It delivered quite a bit of energy. The 115 grain original bullet, you're looking at about 1,694 foot-pounds of energy. 120 grain projectile, you're probably looking at around 1,612 foot-pounds of energy. And 110, you're probably looking at around 1,525 foot-pounds of energy. So it definitely was a significant improvement over the 5.56, to say the least. Looking over here, you can actually see some of the projectiles themselves. One was a 115 grain jacketed hollow point, and the next one was an OTM, open tip match projectile. The original projectiles were of this type right here. In fact, the round that you're seeing here was one of the original prototypes of this cartridge. I learned of this cartridge in probably 2003, 2004, when it was super secret and it was being developed. A lot of the work was being done by Remington and by Precision Reflex. The first rifles themselves to fire this cartridge in the prototype stage were manufactured by Dave Dunlop over at Precision Reflex Company, and the ammunition was done by Remington. Remington was pretty much convinced by Sergeant Holland that there was a requirement for this ammunition, and this was going to be the future for the U.S. military. So Remington actually dove into it pretty heavy and invested quite a bit of money into it. In the end, that would be far from the actual case that was going to happen. Showing on the right over here, this is actually a pretty neat armor-piercing load that was designed by Silver State Armory. It's basically a sabbated. It's a copper jacket with a steel penetrator core that comes to a sharp point to it. This is an extremely effective armor-piercing round that will function in the 6.8 SPC rifle with no reliability issues whatsoever. This box of ammunition is rather interesting in the history of it. This was actually one of the first runs of ammunition that Remington did. This was not production ammunition. This was actually R&D type ammunition. You can tell from the white box. And what this was 115 grain boat tail hollow point match. The interesting thing we're going to talk about with this ammunition is again, this was the first lot of ammunition. What happened with this rifle was the cartridge was being developed. It got a lot of buzz. And with having a lot of buzz, many manufacturers rushed out to actually get sample rifles out or prototype rifles out before the cartridge was even finalized. The fact that people were manufacturing rifles before they actually had ammunition was a big problem. First of all, the chambers that were out there were not really finalized. The 6.8 cartridge really was not optimized until the release of the Spec 2 ammunition, which we're going to go over right here in a minute. Many of the rifles that went out there had the original specifications. The SAMI specification was put out very quickly due to the fact that you had so many rifles that were out there. And with the ongoing development of the ammunition, you didn't want to make rifles that wouldn't be compatible with the actual production run ammunition. So the SAMI specifications were for what's referred to as the Spec 1 chamber. Then we have what's referred to as a Spec 2 chamber. A majority of the manufacturers right now actually utilize the Spec 2 chamber versus the Spec 1. What the Spec 2 does is it's actually the optimized 6.8 SPC cartridge. It provides higher pressures, more power, more velocity. The actual difference is actually in the lead of the chamber. Now you can actually take a Spec 1 and convert it into a Spec 2 with a proper chamber reamer. But what a lot of companies did was because there was actually a SAMI spec on the Spec 1 cartridge, they remained with that specification. Such as LMT is a good example of somebody who stuck with the Spec 1 chamber. Now, when the Spec 2 ammunition came out, a lot of companies were reluctant to actually produce it because there was a whole bunch of rifles out there that it wasn't compatible with. In fact, there was very few companies to this day who still manufacture a proper Spec 2 ammunition. And that company is basically Silver State Armory. Silver State Armory, of any company, has invested more money, time, and effort into the development of cartridges for this caliber. They truly believed in it. They spent a lot of money on R&D, probably offered more projectile options than any other manufacturer that was out there. The military history with the 6.8 was really, really slow. The rifle was developed for a designated marksmanship rifle as well as an assault rifle. Come to find, once Remington got the ammunition ready to show it to SOCOM, they found that there was really no requirement for it. So there's definitely no guarantee that it was going to be bought by the Army. And in the end, the ammunition was compared to the Mark II 6.2 Black Hills ammunition coming out of a Mark 12 rifle. And they really found that for as far as wounding ballistics, there really wasn't that much of a difference between the two. And it pretty much died a very quick death in the military. So you had some companies here who invested a lot of money into this cartridge, into the rifle development, who really were wondering how they were going to recoup their money. So the cartridge was introduced to the commercial market. Now the commercial market, because of what it was designed for, at first there was a lot of demand for it. People were very interested in it. The ammunition at the time, we're talking around the 2004, 2005, 2006 time period. The only company that was really manufacturing ammunition for it at that time was Remington. I'm not actually sure at what point Silver State Armory got in, but the rifles themselves were basically AR-15 type rifles with a new barrel that was chambered in the 6.8 cartridge. They had to develop a new magazine because it would not cycle or function in the standard AR magazine. You had a different follower, and you also had a different profile for as far as the shape of the magazine itself. And of course the bolt. The actual case head dimensions of there are much larger than the standard 5.56, so you had to have a dedicated bolt for it as well. The pressures were rather high also, so there's also for quite some time issues with durability, with the parts holding up to to the pressures of the 6.8 SPC, especially when you went with the Spec 2 ammunition. But the feeding was really a major problem. It was very hard to find any magazines that were really reliable. I've actually tested numerous different types of magazines, C-Products Defense, and PRI magazines and so forth. I have to say the best magazines that I've used for reliability are the ones actually manufactured by PRI, Precision Reflex Manufacturing. It's a steel magazine. It tends to be the most reliable of the M16 type magazines for it to function in. Well, its buzz died pretty quickly, and due to the lack of support for a lot of ammunition, I think it lost its popularity quick. There was a lot of people who still, again, collectors, enthusiasts, who liked it for what it was, being developed as a military cartridge. But we want to sort of move forward a few more years, probably towards the late 2008, 2009, 2010. The rifle started gaining popularity again, and a lot of it had to do with hunting, deer hunting, and particularly hog hunting down southeast Texas, and a lot of the a lot of states were actually having problems with feral hogs. One rifle manufacturer sticks out very, very quickly of being integral in the development of the 6.8 SPC rifle, and that is LWRCI. LWRCI, I think, very quickly realized the potential of the cartridge, and they realized that there was a future for it. And they also, being gun designers themselves, not just manufacturers, but designers, realized that there was some shortcomings in trying to utilize it in a standard AR platform. They knew there was a feeding issue. They had made many rifles that utilized the standard AR magazine. They did a lot of redesign work on the bolt itself. Now comes probably around the 2000, I probably would say the 2011, 2012, 13, and that area in there. They started working on a PDW version of this rifle. It was a short barrel rifle for a Middle East customer. This Middle East customer was looking basically as a presidential guard type weapon. And they wanted something that was more powerful than a 5.56, but yet was more user-friendly than an AK. And LWRCI showed them the 6.8 cartridge, and they loved it. They really liked the durability, the reliability, and they liked the fact that it had the sheer power that they were looking for. So the problem was they wanted a short barrel. It was a short, I think it was around 8.5 inches. And the problem with that was in reliability. The actual cartridge was designed around the premises of a 16-inch or an 18-inch barrel. So the actual pressure curve reaches pressure peak much closer to the gas port, which made the rifle cycle reliably. But with that short 8.5-inch barrel of that PDW, the actual pressure peak was actually after the bullet left the muzzle. So you would have short stroking issues. So they had to go to work on a new cartridge, not necessarily a new cartridge, but a modified cartridge that would work in this short barrel, not only with a short barrel, but the short gas system, but as well suppressed. And LWRCI went to work with Federal to design this cartridge. Not only was this cartridge going to be for this Middle Eastern contract, military contract, which was going to be really groundbreaking, but also was going to be sold very much in the commercial market as well. The specific cartridge that was designed for this military customer was a 90 grain Spear gold dot projectile. You had excellent velocities, and the actual pressure curve was ultraviolet propellant that they used. So the way the powder was actually designed, your pressure curve occurred right behind the gas block on that short 8.5-inch barrel, which created reliability that was needed for a military-grade weapon. Now there was also a setback to this as well. That 8.5-inch PDW would only fire this cartridge. What would happen when you would try to put any other cartridge in that rifle, the pressure curve again was beyond the gas port, the rifle would end up short stroking. So the actual rifles that were delivered to this customer, you were only able to use this specific round. Now, the ammunition that was developed was manufactured by Federal primarily, but there was also a couple second and third source contracts. So once these rifles began shipping to this Middle East customer, that there'd be a constant flow of ammunition. The PDW is based off of LWRCI's new 6.8 weapons platform. I definitely would say it's fair that any 6.8 SPC rifle out in the industry, this is the only one that was actually designed specifically for the cartridge. And many of the features that you'll see on this 6.8, again 6.8 is SIX8, this particular model you will find on that PDW that was sold to that international customer. The most important thing we want to talk about on this as far as change was the actual magazine itself. As previously stated, the standard 5.56mm magazine profile did not work very well for the 6.8 SPC cartridge. They knew that, they had seen it around, and they knew if they wanted to have a military grade version of this rifle that this magazine was not going to work. they needed to make a magazine that was actually designed specifically for this cartridge. So anytime a company would make a major change that was out of the norm, that was proprietary, it's very risky, because you're going to invest money into something that you're not going to know if you're going to get it out of it. You're going against the industry standards. But LWRCI, I think, realized that they had this potential for a military contract. It's never been done before with this cartridge, and they knew there was no way of skating around the reliability issue with feeding. And if they were going to provide a rifle to a military in this caliber, they were going to do it right. So what they did was, along with Magpul, they designed a new magazine. This magazine was designed specifically for the 6.8. As you can see, it has many different changes. You'll see that it's wider, so it actually accommodates the larger diameter of the 6.8 SPC projectile. You can see that it's longer, so it will hold the same 30 rounds. And you can also see the actual curvature is different. If you look at the curvature of the 6.8 versus the 5.56, you'll see that the curvature is a little different as well. Longer, so it will take the full 30. Now the 6.8 magazine is a Gen 3. It does have the window on there as well. So along with this magazine, a new lower receiver had to be developed. An actual lower receiver that would accept it. So what that means is the lower receiver for the Model 6.8 is not compatible with any other magazine other than the specific one. The upper receiver itself is proprietary as well for it. And again, you have a rifle designed around the 6.8. We're going to go over some of the specifics of this rifle itself, because these will all pertain not only to the 6.8 commercial rifle, but also to the government contract rifle that was done. You do have the proprietary, or not proprietary, but it's manufactured by LWRCI, their stock. This is a shorter, lighter weight stock. And an interesting thing to note about LWRCI is they have their own plastic machine, plastic mold ejector CNC machines. They have their own molds, and they manufacture a lot of their own polymer components in-house. And this is one of them that they do. Receiver extension is a typical mil spec, 6 position. As you can see from the material, this is Cerakoted flat dark earth. The rifles that were shipped over to the international customer were left black. LWRCI does offer this rifle black, flat dark earth, as well as some other colors as well. The selector lever on this rifle is also designed by LWRCI. That's a larger profile. It is a polymer ambidextrous selector. Very easy to utilize with your hands. It's very high profile, very easy to use. LWRCI has used a lot of the Magpul products over the years, which totally makes sense since I think they have some of the best products in the industry. So they're utilizing a Magpul Mo grip with a rubberized feel to it. If you look on the back of the receiver extension end plate was replaced with a LWRCI design, which is an end plate, but it also has dual QD attachment points, one on the right, one on the left-hand side. Moving forward, we have an ambidextrous bolt catch. Now, the nice thing about this ambidextrous bolt catch is it can be used to lock the bolt open as well as release. Ambidextrous bolt releases that you see out in the industry today may only be utilized as a release. But this one here, due to the design, you can lock the bolt open or you can release it at the same time, or whichever you prefer to do. Of course, we have the standard location for a magazine release. The trigger itself, we're going to take a look at more when we open the rifle up. Looking on the left-hand side, again, we have the ambidextrous safety selector. And we have an ambidextrous magazine release as well. This is one that's designed by LWRCI, and the receiver is actually designed for it. It's machined out for it, as you can see. They do come with the UID label, and you can also see this is a dedicated 6.8 lower receiver by having that on there. We're going to take a look at the operating system as well. The barrel on this rifle is actually a heavy barrel. Which is excellent for this cartridge. It increases the accuracy. We also have fluting on here as well. Plus, it is definitely assist in cooling, especially when you're firing a lot of rounds. And again, the rifle that was designed for that military contract was a selective fire rifle. Now, it does utilize I won't say it is not a monolithic upper receiver. It's actually 3 pieces. You have the top handguard, which is removable, the lower handguard, which is attached to the receiver, and you have the upper receiver itself. However, the barrel is fully free floating underneath the handguards. The sights are designed by LWRCI. They're actually called the skirmish sights. The front sight is basically an HK type profile with the way that the ears are on it. It's a standard M4 type square front sight post. However, looking at the rear sight, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. This is only adjustable for windage in the rear. The front is elevation. But if you look at how you adjust your apertures, you rotate. You have larger apertures for closer range, and then you have smaller apertures for longer range. Very, very well made sight. Very, very well made. These are utilized on all of their rifles. The charging handle itself is also ambidextrous, as we can see. Both left and right hand you have latches. As you can see, when you pull from the other side, it opens up on the left. Again, this rifle was designed to be completely ambidextrous, and they did a very good job at that. This has a standard A2 flash suppressor compensator onto it. As you can see, the bottom is left solid. However, this can be removed, and this rifle is fully capable of being suppressed, which leads us to another part of the gas system. This rifle here also has an adjustable gas valve. You have a standard under normal conditions, and you lift forward. Now you're actually in suppressed. What that suppressed does is it saves a lot of wear and tear on the rifle. Whenever you put a sound suppressor on a rifle, you are basically overgassing the system. You're creating significantly a lot more port pressure, and what port pressure does is it makes your action operate much faster. And when your action operates faster, you have a couple different things you have to worry about. First is reliability, because your bolt is opening up much quicker. So you want to make sure that your cartridge case has had enough time to contract so it can be safely and reliably removed from the chamber and then ejected out the side of the rifle. You also have, due to that fast opening stroke, you can damage part of the fire control group. The bolt itself will take a lot more of a beating. So suppressors, believe it or not, are not very good for rifles because it makes them work a lot harder and a lot faster. By having a adjustable gas system on there, you are able to modify the amount of gas that's left into the rifle. So for a suppressor, you put in the suppressed setting, you're allowing a lot less gas in to the rifle. So you're basically trying to keep the gas system balanced in the same way that you would if it was on unsuppressed with standard ammunition. So you basically want to duplicate the same port pressure that you have under that condition with having a sound suppressor on there. That is a very, very important reliability and durability enhancement that pretty much any battle rifle should have that's going to be using a suppressor. I feel that it's extremely important. I've used many rifles with this setting on it, and it's very easy to tell they're working as well. For the most part, any of these rifles that are when they're being fired, your ejection pattern should be coming at you around 4 o'clock. So you're firing here, you should be coming around 4 or 5 o'clock. The faster that bolt is moving, the more forward that ejection pattern will start. So when you start getting on a suppressed setting, they'll start moving forward like this. So you'll actually see, if you were to fire on the unsuppressed setting, watch where the fired cartridge case lands, which will be forward. Then you put it on the suppressed to start to see it starting to shift more rearward. Again, very important for durability and reliability of the system. We're going to take the upper and lower receiver apart. We're going to take a look at the lower really close, and then we're going to take a look at the gas system. What we're going to do is we're going to disassemble this and take a look at some of the inside of it. First, we're going to take a look at the lower receiver itself. As you can see, the actual hammer, trigger, and disconnector are also have a nitride coating on them as well. Then it gives you a little bit more of a, I think it probably gives you a little bit more of a smooth trigger pull. Certainly is a benefit. If you look at the actual buffer itself, we have an H2. H2s are generally necessary on piston guns. What they do is they give you a slightly lower cyclic rate, and it also helps you a little bit on the opening stroke for as far as trying to keep that bolt closed a little bit longer. The main reason that you would require an H2 on an external piston type rifle in this family of weapons is because you get a much more violent strike on the bolt carrier when it starts to move rearward. Once that piston strikes it, it gives a violent jerk rearward, and the cam itself will actually dig into the upper receiver. By having the extra weight on there, that will assist you for as far as trying to keep that bolt closed a little bit longer to lessen the effects of that damage from the cam striking into the receiver. And also, generally with an external piston gun like this, you also have a much higher rate of fire, and that higher rate of fire, along with the this is a heavy barrel. Again, this is not a standard profile barrel. This is a heavy match grade or machine gun type barrel. It would require that to prevent bolt carrier bounce on fully automatic. So the H2 buffer serves a couple different reasons. Again, depending if you have a fully automatic rifle versus a semi-automatic. Also, whether it's external piston or direct gas. You can also see everything in the inside. You can see how the actual ambidextrous bolt catch is working as well. It has a little cam in there that works, and as you can see, they work together. You can push the lower portion of each side or of each of the bolt catches themselves, and it will work. The fit and finish of this is beautiful. The cerakote coating job is beautiful. It's what you'd come to expect out of LWRCI. Something I also want to add about this company too is I've had the opportunity to work with them as a contractor. In fact, this version of the rifle that went to the Middle Eastern customer, I wrote the armorer's manual for, and I spent a week down at LWRCI. And going to the factory, it's extremely interesting. They are a very, very self-contained company. They are one of the few companies that actually has their own hammer forge machine. They manufacture their own barrels in-house, which is incredible, not only for being able to provide the customer with a hammer forged barrel that they want, but also the fact that they can maintain that control of that quality. They're also manufacturing their barrel extensions, and many of those components they're manufacturing. As far as the polymer components, such as, like you see the snake skin panels, for instance, the stocks and everything, they have their machines in there. They have their own molds where they can make this stuff. The assembly process also is very streamlined. They make significant use of fixtures. Fixtures make assembly much easier. Not only does it make it so it doesn't require as much skill to do it, it takes a lot of the human error out of it. So what all these fixtures do is it enables you to assemble a rifle very, very simply, very accurately, very reliably, and actually not damage the receivers. And also, by having all these fixtures, it ensures everything is done the exact same way each time. One of the keys to reliability in a firearm is, from rifle to rifle, is having that consistency in manufacture. For instance, every barrel is made the same way. Every torque ratio is the same way. Every component is installed at the same rate. For as far as you put this on first, this on second. All that by the way they do it with the actual fixtures, and being able to maintain control by manufacturing parts in-house is really one of the things that makes the quality of this rifle as outstanding as it is. LWRCI is owned by Mr. Bernstein, who also owns several other businesses that are in the manufacturing world as well. And several of those manufacturers will also manufacture components for LWRCI. So you have the same owner who owns the same companies, who can have several of his other companies manufacturing components for LWRCI. And again, by doing that, LWRCI is able to make sure that quality control, to make sure everything is done properly. And that's really a sign of a military grade weapon, in my opinion. If you look at a lot of the weapons that we look at as military grade, one of the key aspects of that is manufacturing those parts in-house. Because again, when you're buying parts from somebody else, many companies out there are actually just assembling rifles. They're buying components from anybody, and those are made off of drawings of several different companies. So basically you're getting a whole bunch of parts, and you're hoping when you put them together that there's not going to be a stack of tolerance issue and everything's going to work. Sometimes it doesn't work so well. But when every single part is made off of your drawings and your quality control is ensuring that it's made that way, you're now ensuring that things are going to work properly. Things are going to fit together, you're going to be within your stack of tolerances, and you're going to have a durable and reliable rifle. And LWRCI really stands out when it comes to that. And they also have an excellent R&D facility for as far as people who can actually make new products rather than just mass produce. This 6.8 is a perfect example of that. It's a perfect example of taking an existing platform and a new cartridge and adapting that platform for that new cartridge, and not just by trying to swap parts out and make it interchangeable, by actually making those parts designed for that caliber, which is where this rifle really stands out. Now we're going to take a look at the bolt carrier group itself. Also manufactured in-house. It's manufactured from one solid piece of steel. They also like the nickel boron coating as well. When these rifles were first introduced by LWRC, they actually had a two-piece. You had a carrier and you had a separate, if you want to call it, they call this a tombstone, but there was originally it looked more like a solid gas key. Initially, they found also that was unreliable, that due to the impact of the operating rod on that component, that it would break. So they were actually the first one to actually make a one-piece bolt carrier that was for use in their external piston operation. You can also see these flares in the back. One of the problems that you encounter with external piston guns in an AR platform is what's called bolt carrier tilt. What happens is when you're in direct gas, the gas goes into the actual carrier itself, into the body, and the expansion chambers form between the back of the bolt and back of the carrier. That's even distribution of the pressures from the gas. So when it starts to unlock, it goes straight into the receiver extension. Well, when you have it an external piston gun, your actual operating rod is striking the face of that tombstone, and it's making it go off center. It's making it tilt. Well, when it tilts down like that, what that's doing is that's scraping against the bottom of the receiver extension, and that actually will damage and eventually wear away the material on that receiver extension. It can actually cause failures. Basically, what this flaring does is it puts a better alignment between the rear of the bolt carrier and the receiver extension, which is basically a guard against having the carrier tilt issue being an issue. The next thing we're going to look at is the actual bolt itself. The bolt itself is made specifically for this cartridge, and it has a lot of really nice features to it. Let me move this out of the way so we can get a better look here. Remove the firing pin. Just assembles the same way any other M16 type would. The bolt carrier itself it has a lot of resemblance to the LMT enhanced bolt, with having the lobster tail extractor. This is similar in some ways, but it also is very different. We're going to take this apart and take a look at some of those differences. First of all, looking at the extractor itself, you have a much more aggressive extractor claw in there. It grabs actually more of the extractor rim than any standard AR-15 one would. That's a significant enhancement. Also, you'll see in here a little bit of a slot that's cut right there, a little bit of a valley in there. That's the Crud Groove. That's for when you get brass chips and everything, they can actually have a place to go rather than on the surfaces here. They could actually cause any problems with the extraction process because of filth. And you'll also notice that there are two little tits on the extractor itself that stick out. That's utilized because there's two extractor springs used instead of one. Well, you can actually see the extractor springs right here. We're going to pull those out. The extractor spring itself is it's a much more powerful spring. It's probably even used by the LMT one. It's a longer spring, and it also has an actual buffer in there as well, similar to the way the buffer works on the extractor spring, or the extractor spring on the standard rifle. That gives you additional compression to make the extractor springs last longer. Also, these are actually at an angle rather than straight up, which also increases the life of the springs and the reliability. Looking at the breech face itself, this is actually this fully supports the rim of the cartridge case. Unlike the standard bolt carrier, we actually have this part here cut out, which is actually what allows the extractor to sit in here. The extractor actually snaps over the side, so the entire base of this cartridge case is supported by the breech face. That is a lot better for durability, reliability, and also under over the beach conditions or water conditions. It deals much better with higher pressure. You can also possibly see in here there's a groove that goes all the way around the perimeter of this of the breech face on here, which is also a crud groove. It's also a place where primer, brass chips, primer sealant, or any other kind of debris can actually go that will not prevent problems from the bolt locking because of a filthy breech face. The bolt itself has a nickel boron finish. These bolts are also proof tested to ensure against stress fractures. Literally, there was no expense spared at all. When they did this, they wanted to make the most durable and reliable bolt they could for this heavy hitting cartridge. So reassembly, we're going to do the same. You want to make sure when you insert the springs back in that you have an open end here, because that's where that little tit's going to go. Inside here, it's going to line properly and give proper pressure on the extractor springs. Big finger sometimes is hard. And as you can see, the two little tits go right in the spring. You push inward. And that will be their enhanced bolt. They have had prototypes of this as well for the 5.56. They were actually on the original individual carbine rifle that they had made to submit, which they didn't, which was a very smart. That was a very smart call on LWRCI's part. They actually did develop the individual carbine for the individual carbine program. They realized very quickly on that this program was not going to go. So unlike a lot of other companies who invested a shitload of money into a program that was not actually going to be come to fruition, they actually withdrew from the program, which in the end turned out to be a very wise business decision for both financial and effort into something that wasn't going to come to fruition. Just for reassembly, it's very typical of any AR-type rifle. You make sure your extractor is facing the right. You can drop in your cam pin. You don't have to worry about rotating it because you can drop it in the correct way. Drop the frying pan. Looking at the upper receiver, it's designed so you can have removable rail segments. This is a removable rail segment here, and we also have what's called the snake skin. As you can see, there's screws here. These are screws that go all the way through the entire length of the right, left, and bottom side here. Like for instance, right here, I have a rail panel, so I could actually put a flashlight if I chose. And then I actually have the LWRCI snakeskin on there. On the bottom, same thing, but I also have a hand stop on there, which is also made by LWRCI. And on the opposite side, we have a combination of a rail as well as a QD point adapter. And I have a couple of the snakeskins on there too. I need to get one more for that. We're going to show you the actual operating system itself. So we basically unscrew these pusher screws, and they're held captive, so you don't have to remove them. Slide forward and lift up. This exposes the actual gas system. Now this system here is extremely durable. It's very simple. It's actually three-piece. You have your actual op rod with a return spring, your intermediate rod, and you have your actual gas piston here. Then you have your gas block here, and up front here is your actual gas valve to switch from suppressed to unsuppressed. Now the spring, what that does is when the actual gas system goes to the rear, it returns it to its forward position. And you also see the vents on here as well. Well, what this does is it makes sure that the actual vents, the gas underneath the handguard forward rather than back into the shooter's face. Now, however, you do get the blowback with suppressed fire because, again, by plugging that system up longer and having the increased pressures, you're going to get that gas coming back in out of from the chamber into the rear. Again, you can mitigate a lot of that with with the suppressed setting, but again, still you're still creating that overpressure situation where that gas is being blown back there, so you will still get that gas in your face. So disassembly is very simple. Pull forward, you can remove the gas block or the piston, remove the intermediate rod, and now I can remove the operating rod itself. This is the actual spigot here, and you can actually see that there's radials on here, radial cuts. They also help to sort of a self-scraping mechanism. You may also want to ask why you would want to have 3 pieces instead of just 1 operating rod. You do get a flex when this thing will operate, and that flex can move it around a little bit. By having the 3rd piece in there, you have an interface in the front, an interface in the rear. And what that does is it keeps, I think it's, you want to call it thermal expansion, if you want to call it that. It will keep everything aligned straight and have a little bit of a flex in there that's needed due to that thermal expansion. You can see it's marked heavy barrel. You can see that the heavy fluting here as well. You can actually see here how the actual piston works itself as far as having the suppressed and unsuppressed. You see there's actually two different gas block sizes in here, and by rotating it is which one that you would use. Very simple, very durable, and this is a very well-proven system. This system has been utilized in 5.56. It's been utilized in the 6.8 SPC as well as the 7.62 NATO. It's been used in military-grade selective fire rifles, law enforcement rifles, as well as the standard commercial-grade rifles. It's gone through a lot of improvements and a lot of updates over the years. LWRCI has really grown. I definitely want to say they're one of the pioneers of the external piston AR. If you go back in time, you look at when these rifles really first became available, you're looking at the HK416 and the POF and this rifle around the same time. Those dates are really sketchy on who was the actual first one, but all 3 of these were the actual pioneers. And LWRCI has actually based their business for the most part off of these external piston rifles. And as you can see, this is all done at user level. You don't have to have an armor to disassemble the system. Now, cleaning. People say you don't have to clean an external piston system. That is complete bullshit. Anything that's a machine that has working parts, that has any fouling that can be introduced into it, does need cleaning. Now, unlike the direct gas system, which actually introduces the gases back into the bolt carrier, where the bolt carrier is actually where the piston system is, all this is happening in more of a forward position, so you're not getting any of that debris that you would normally get with direct gas in the back. So it is cleaner. Now, we're not really going to get into the issue of whether which one is better than the other, because it is very skeptical between both. Myself, I've always been a DI fan. I do agree that there are some conditions where the external piston is definitely an improvement. But, when you want to actually compare the two of them, there's some realities that you have to have. You actually have to have a specification that the rifles have to meet. If you have a U.S. mil spec where all rifles have to, say they all have to fire 1,000 rounds without cleaning. Well, both a DI gun and an external piston gun will do that. So which one's better? They both meet the requirement. Are you going to run a gun to failure and to see which one's better? That's interesting, but it's not realistic. Your average shooter is going to clean this gun after every time he uses it. That's including a soldier. The U.S. military considers a battle 300 rounds. So every 300 rounds, you would expect a soldier is going to clean this weapon. Both weapons will do that, and both will be reliable. So, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that one's more reliable than the other. I will tell you that they're both two different ways to get to the same place. The whole purpose is knocking that bolt back to where they're just two different ways of doing the same task. It is true that you don't get the filth into the back the same way you do with the direct gas. Absolutely. However, when you actually fire suppressed, you really can't tell the difference between a direct gas and a piston, because you'll have all that garbage that will go back in there as well through the chamber. You can always tell by looking at a cartridge case whether or not that it was fired in a suppressed gun or not. If you have a unsuppressed gun, your cartridge case will be nice and shiny. If you have a suppressed gun, you're going to have all kinds of black garbage all over that cartridge case. Looks like soot. So that basically tells you how much gas is coming back into that system. Reassembly is very simple. You insert the operating end first. Now we're going to insert the piston itself right over the spigot. Insert the intermediate rod. Now this is all nitride coated as well. LWRCI has made a lot of use of nitriding on both the barrel, flash suppressor, and the gas system. They are very much convinced that it's better than your conventional manganese phosphate. And for as far as the barrel is concerned, they're also very much convinced that it's superior to the chrome plating. So that's one of the types of technology that they do use. Now, basically every feature that I've showed you on here applies both to the military as well as the commercial versions of this caliber. Getting back into the military contract a little bit, the rifle that was sold was history in the making. The LWRCI has had the first and the only official sale to a military of this caliber rifle. This Middle East customer bought them in just due to the confidentiality agreements and everything. We can't specify how many, but it was a significant number of guns that were sold to this customer, along with ammunition, guns that are actually in service, that are being used. The guns have had a significant amount of testing that goes through them. Now, in the commercial level, these guns have found their niche in hog hunting. The 6.8 SPC is an ideal hog hunting cartridge. In fact, the military around here, the Federal Gold Dot, there was actually a test that was done by an actual doctor who runs a pig ranch, showing the effectiveness of not only that cartridge as well as this rifle. He was actually shooting from helicopters with that short 8.5-inch barrel pigs, and it was having a significant amount of damage, and it was dropping the pigs pretty quick. And then we come down to the actual firing of this gun. You will see the footage of it firing, but I want to talk a little bit about the results that came out of that. This gun is extremely, the recoil is not much more than that of a 5.56. I will tell you it's a very solid feeling gun. You know you're feeling a quality piece of equipment in your hand. And I will tell you, the 6.8, when it hits you, you know you got power. You know, it's between the sound and the feel, you know you got something there. And I fired about 300 rounds out of this rifle, and I have to say that there wasn't a single malfunction. Bolt locked back on the shot. I fired several different kinds of ammunition. I fired the actual military load, the Hornady Bore GMX. This is a mission that was specifically designed for Hornady to actually hunt boars. I had the Federal Fusion, and I also had some of the Hornady ammunition as well. All that ammunition in this 16-inch barrel worked beautifully. All of these rounds are perfectly capable of hunting, whether it's a boar or whether it's deer. I think LWRCI has probably given life to the 6.8 more so than any other weapons manufacturer. A lot of companies have dropped them. A lot of companies just make them on rare occasion, just because there isn't really that much of a demand. You know, in the early days, you really only had Remington making ammunition. You know, now there's a lot more ammunition available. Federal, Remington. I even believe you have CCI. There's Silver State Armory. There's many companies that manufacture ammunition for this. Not CCI. CCI is manufacturer of the projectile for the bullet. So ammunition is not that hard to come by. You even have inexpensive full metal jacket loads. For instance, Federal American Eagle has just came out with a 6.8 American Eagle load. You have the UMC ammunition line from Remington, so you have inexpensive ammunition. For as far as cost is concerned, this ammunition is not much more. Doesn't cost much more than a box 300 Blackout would. So the cost really isn't the issue. I just think that with the loss of the military, that was never a military contract. With the loss of the interest in the military, a lot of these companies are forced to try to recoup all their R&D costs through the commercial market. And LWRCI has stuck with this gun, has stuck with this caliber. It's evolved it. It's evolved it not only into a hunting rifle, but it made it into a military rifle. As much as the initial efforts that went into this gun for military purposes, the initial design never saw that military service. So if you go back to the 2004 time period, it didn't happen. The original Remington and the original rifles that were developed that were supposedly going to be introduced to SOCOM, it didn't happen. LWRC, maybe 10 or so years down the road, they were able to manufacture a military grade rifle with an ammunition and sell it to a foreign military in large quantities, and the rifle has had a very good reputation over there in the sand. It's durable. It's not sensitive to sand and dirt. Like any rifle, it has to be maintained. But it's demonstrated the reliability and durability of a battle rifle in this caliber, and LWRCI is the only company that can say they actually did that. Now we're going to show you some of the actual footage of us test firing this rifle.
We're going to test fire the LWRCI 6.8, 6.8 SPC. The ammunition that we have is several different types. Federal American Eagle, we have Federal Fusion, Hornady, a couple different kinds of Hornady. And we also have the specific one that was designed for the LWRCI contract in the Middle East, which is a Federal 90 grain gold dot soft point. We're going to fire several different kinds of ammunition. This ammunition here is the Federal, this happens to be the American Gunner, 6.8 SPC, 110 grain boat tail match hollow point. Hornady GMX. Full bore hog ammo. A solid copper projectile.
Why is it called full bore?
It's designed for boar hunting. Pig hunting.
If you're looking for a rifle for pig hunting or for hunting and you want the AR platform, the 6.8 is an awesome choice. It's the ammunition's available, it's there, and if you're looking for a rifle to shoot it, the LWRCI 6.8 series is the rifle. I don't think there's another rifle out there in this caliber that will offer you the reliability, durability. This one will. Using the proper magazine makes all the difference in the world. You can go on their website and you can actually see all the different versions, different barrel lengths. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click like and please subscribe. Thank you.